My family tried to abort me for being a girl and ignored me for 28 years. Now my brother is infertile, and they demand my baby carry their last name to save the lineage. But when I said no, the entire family collapsed, and they never expected what would happen next. I'm 28 years old. I live in California with my husband James, and I'm pregnant with our first child. This should be the best news in the world, right? Well, turns out my biological family, the same one that basically ignored me my entire life, now wants me to give my baby their last name to fix my brother's fertility issues. Yes, you read that right. And when I say they ignored me my entire life, I'm not exaggerating even a little bit. The truth is, my mother literally tried to abort me when she found out I was a girl. Let me rewind because this story is long and complicated, but I need to tell it completely so you understand why when my brother Connor showed up at my door 3 weeks ago, begging me to give my baby the family last name, all I could do was close the door in his face. I grew up in Illinois, in a house where from the moment I was born it was clear that I wasn't what my parents wanted. My Aunt Susan told me when I was like 16. In one of those moments when you're so desperate to understand what you did wrong that you need answers. Turns out my mom was pregnant with me and went with my dad to get an ultrasound to find out the baby's sex. You know, all excited because Connor was 2 years old and they wanted another child. When the doctor told them it was a girl, my mom apparently started crying right there, and not from happiness precisely. She asked the doctor if there was any way to change that, to not go through with the pregnancy. My dad convinced her to have me because, according to my aunt, he was worried about what the family would say if they aborted, but neither of them actually wanted me. They wanted another boy, period. And it showed. God, it showed from the beginning. Connor was the center of the universe in that house. Like everything he did was a divine miracle. He'd get good grades, and my parents would organize celebratory dinners. Literally invite the whole family. I could get the best grades in my class and barely receive a, "That's nice," from my mom while she prepared Connor's favorite dish for dinner. I'm not exaggerating. That happened when I won a state science competition in 8th grade. My mom told me, "That's good, Amelia," and then started making the BBQ ribs that Connor loved because he had scored a goal in his soccer game that weekend. Connor learned quickly that he could do whatever he wanted to me without consequences. I remember perfectly when I was like 12 years old. He was 14, and I was doing a school project on the house computer. Connor wanted to use the computer to play video games, so he just turned off the computer without saving my work. I lost like 3 hours of research and writing. I went crying to my mom, and she told me not to be dramatic, that Connor needed to relax after his soccer practice and I could do my project later. When I told her I had to turn it in the next day, she yelled at me to stop being selfish and to think about my brother for once. Those kinds of things happened. Constantly. Connor would hide my stuff, tell my parents I had done things I hadn't done, push me when no one was looking, and if I complained, I was the one causing problems. Once, I think I was 15. Connor told my parents that I had keyed his new car. I hadn't even been near the car that day. I was at the library studying, but my parents grounded me for 2 months and made me pay for the repairs with money I had saved from my part-time job at a coffee shop. Later, I found out from one of Connor's friends that he had scratched the car himself accidentally when taking his bike out of the garage, but by that point, it didn't matter anymore. The thing is, I learned to survive by staying invisible. I focused on school, worked as much as I could, saved every penny thinking about the day I could get out of that house. My parents never went to my school events. Not a single one. I had a play where I had the lead role my senior year of high school, and I begged them to go. My mom told me they couldn't because Connor had a soccer game the same day, in another city, obviously, and the whole family had to go support him. The game was at 2 in the afternoon and my play was at 7 at night. They could have gone to both, but they didn't even consider it. I got a full scholarship to a university in California. It was the best day of my life. Seriously. I remember when I opened the acceptance letter with the scholarship information, I started crying right there in my room. But they were tears of happiness because I knew I was finally going to be able to get out of that house. I told my mom that night at dinner and she barely looked up from her plate. She said something like, California is far, and kept eating. My dad asked how much they were going to have to pay, and when I told him the scholarship covered everything, literally everything, he said, "Well, I guess that's fine then," and changed the subject to talk about Connor's new soccer team at the community college I'm going to attend. I left for California 2 weeks after graduating high school. I had just turned 18 and basically got on a plane with 2 suitcases and never looked back. Well, that's not entirely true. I guess part of me still had hope that things would change, that my parents would realize they missed me or something. But it didn't happen. In college, I met James my first semester. He was in my English class, and one day he offered to share his notes with me because I had missed class from being sick. He was kind, genuinely kind, like without expecting anything in return. And honestly, I wasn't used to that. We started dating after a few months of being friends, and when I brought him to meet his family for Thanksgiving, my sophomore year, because obviously I wasn't going back to Illinois, they treated me like I was their daughter. His mom hugged me for like 5 minutes the first time she saw me and told me that any friend of James's was part of the family. I cried that night in the guest room because I had never experienced that kind of family warmth. I graduated from college in 4 years with honors. My parents didn't go to my graduation. I gave them 6 months advance notice. I offered to pay for their plane tickets with money I had saved from my part-time jobs. I sent them all the information. Nothing. A week before graduation, my mom sent me a text message, like she didn't even call me, saying they weren't going to be able to go because Connor was having problems with his girlfriend, and they needed to be there to support him. Connor was 24 at that point, living in my parents' house without paying rent, and his problems were that his girlfriend wanted him to get a full-time job instead of working part-time at a friend's bar. You know who did go to my graduation? James's entire family. His parents, his 2 sisters, his grandmother, even his favorite uncle, traveled from different parts of the country to see me receive my diploma. James's mom gave me a necklace that had belonged to her mother with a note that said, "For our daughter of the heart." It was one of the best days of my life, and my biological parents didn't even send a congratulations message. James and I got engaged 2 years after graduation. He's a software engineer, and I work in digital marketing. We do well. We live in a nice apartment near the beach. We had a whole life built together. When we got engaged, I posted the news in my family group chat, with a picture of the ring and everything. My cousin Lily, who was always like my only ally in that family, congratulated me immediately. No one else responded. Literally, no one. 2 days later, my mom responded with "okay," and that was it. We planned our wedding for the following year. I sent them invitations a year in advance because, I don't know, I guess I still had that stupid hope that my parents would want to be there. A month before the wedding, Connor called me, which was weird because he never called me, and told me he had been talking to my parents. According to him, I was ungrateful and never appreciated everything they had done for me, that I had gone to California to live my life without thinking about the family, and that basically I didn't deserve them spending money to travel to my wedding. I told him he was crazy, that they had never done anything for me, and he laughed and told me I was always dramatic. He hung up, and 2 hours later my mom sent me a message saying they weren't going to come to the wedding. I got married in a beautiful ceremony on a beach in California, surrounded by friends, co-workers, and James's family. James's family is my family now. Like, I feel more like a daughter to James's parents than to my own parents. I danced with James's dad at the father-daughter dance. I cried when James's mom helped me put on my dress, and I felt more love that day than I had felt in my entire life in Illinois. My parents and Connor posted pictures on Facebook that same day at a fancy restaurant celebrating I don't know what, making it obvious that it wasn't that they couldn't travel, they just didn't want to. After that, I stopped trying. I blocked my parents and Connor from all my social media. I answered messages from my cousin Lily because she was always good to me. But with the rest of my biological family, I just had no more contact. And you know what? It was liberating. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for approval from people who were never going to give it to me. I wasn't waiting for crumbs of affection from people who saw me as a mistake. But here's where the story gets interesting, or rather, where everything goes to hell depending on how you look at it. Turns out Connor married his girlfriend Victoria like a year after my wedding. My cousin Lily told me everything because she still lived in Illinois. In fact, she rents a room at my parents' house while she finishes her master's degree. According to Lily, Connor's wedding was ridiculous. My parents paid for absolutely everything. Like, we're talking about a reception for 200 people at a luxury hotel, honeymoon in Europe for 3 weeks. Victoria's dress cost more than I make in 3 months. And not only that, my parents bought Connor and Victoria a house as a wedding gift. A complete house, with deeds and everything. They never gave me a cent for college. I worked 3 different jobs to be able to pay my expenses while the scholarship covered tuition, but they bought Connor a damn house. Things were quiet for a while. Lily kept me informed from time to time, but honestly, I was so busy with my life that I barely thought about them. James and I were focused on our careers. We traveled, we were happy, and then, like 8 months ago, James and I decided we wanted to start trying to have a baby. I got pregnant faster than we expected, literally the second month of trying, and we were super excited. We didn't tell my family. We told James's family, immediately, and everyone was super happy. His mom is already buying stuff for the baby and planning how she's going to decorate the guest room for when we visit with the baby. But we didn't tell my biological family anything because, honestly, why? They're not part of my life, and they're definitely not going to be part of my son's life. But Lily found out because I told her, and apparently she mentioned it to my mom without thinking it would cause problems, and this is where everything explodes in the most absurd way possible. Lily called me like 2 months ago, super upset, and told me what was happening. Turns out Connor and Victoria had been trying to have children for like 2 years without success. They went to the doctor and found out that Connor has severe fertility issues, like there's almost zero chance he can have biological children. They can adopt, they can use a sperm donor, they have options, but basically Connor can't have children with his genetic material. And my parents went crazy. According to Lily, they became obsessed with the topic of biological grandchildren. My mom apparently told Connor that if he couldn't give her grandchildren, then what had they spent so much money on him for all his life? My dad, who was always obsessed with continuing the family name and legacy or I don't know what nonsense, was devastated. They started treating Connor the way they always treated me, like with coldness and as if he were a disappointment. Connor was desperate, trying to fix the situation, but obviously there was nothing he could do. The straw that broke the camel's back was when my parents told Connor that if he didn't find a solution, they were going to cut off all financial help. Yes, they were going to take away the house. They were going to stop paying for his car. Everything. Victoria was apparently so stressed with the whole situation that she was considering divorce because the pressure was unbearable. And then they found out I was pregnant. Lily told me that when my mom found out, it was like a light bulb went off. She called Connor immediately and basically told him he had to convince me to give the baby the family last name instead of James's last name. Her twisted logic was that if my baby had the family last name, then technically, the last name continued and there was a biological grandchild, even though it wasn't Connor's child. Don't ask me how she thought that made sense, but that's my family. 3 weeks ago, I was at home on a Saturday morning, like still in pajamas because weekends are sacred, when the doorbell rang. I opened the door and there was Connor. I hadn't seen him in person in like 5 years, and honestly, it took me a second to process it. He looked bad, honestly, like he hadn't slept in weeks, and he had that desperate look that let me know immediately that something was very wrong. He said, "Hi, Amelia. Can I come in? I need to talk to you." And I just stood there, not knowing what to do. James came out of the kitchen, saw Connor, and stood next to me asking me with his eyes if I was okay. I told Connor no, that he couldn't come in, and that if he had something to say, he could say it from the door. Connor started talking fast, like he was super nervous, and basically dumped the whole thing on me at once. He told me he knew I was pregnant, congratulated me, as if that mattered, and then said he had a favor to ask me. When he said favor, I laughed because the audacity was incredible, but I let him keep talking because I needed to hear how ridiculous this was going to get. He told me that he and Victoria couldn't have biological children, which I already knew thanks to Lily, and that my parents were devastated because there weren't going to be grandchildren who carried the family blood. Then he told me, literal these words, "Could you consider giving the baby our last name instead of James's last name? It would be a way to keep the family legacy alive, and it would mean a lot to Mom and stay, Dad." I stood there staring at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. James was just as shocked as I was. I asked Connor if he was serious, and he said yes, that it was a reasonable request considering I was part of the family. I told him that reasonable was the last word I would use to describe his insane request, and I asked him if he really thought I was going to change my son's last name to please the same people who treated me like garbage my entire life. Connor started getting defensive. He said I was exaggerating, that our parents had always loved me, but that I was the one who decided to leave and cut off contact. I told him that was a lie and he knew it. I reminded him of all the times they ignored me, all the times he made my life impossible and my parents did nothing. My graduation, they didn't attend. My wedding, they didn't care about. Connor tried to interrupt me, but I kept going, like I needed to get out everything I had been holding in for years. I told him that Mom had literally tried to abort me when she found out I was a girl, and that perfectly summed up how much they loved me. Connor went pale and told me that wasn't true, that I was making things up. I told him to ask Aunt Susan if he didn't believe me, and that anyway it didn't matter because the reality is they never treated me like a daughter. Then Connor changed strategies. He started begging, literally. He said that Mom and Dad were going to disinherit him if he didn't find a solution, that Victoria was going to leave him, that his life was falling apart. And I could only think, oh, so now he knows what it feels like to be the family disappointment. I told him exactly that, and he got angry. He yelled at me that I was always selfish, that I only thought about myself, that I didn't care about family, that made me laugh because the irony was too much. I told him he had no right to talk to me about selfishness after spending our entire childhood torturing me because he knew he could get away with it. I reminded him about the car he scratched and blamed on me, about the computer, about each and every time he hurt me just because he could. James finally intervened and told Connor it was time to leave. Connor looked at me and told me I was going to regret it, that Mom and Dad weren't going to let this go. I told him perfect, that they could continue ignoring my existence like they always had, and I closed the door. 2 days later, my cousin Lily called to tell me that my parents had followed through on their threat and cut Connor off completely. They took away his access to the family bank account, told him he had 3 months to get out of the house they had bought him because they were going to sell it, took away his car, everything. Connor was devastated, and according to Lily, Victoria was definitely leaving him because the whole situation was too much. And then the calls started. My mom called me first. I didn't answer the first 5 times, but I finally got tired and answered. The first thing she said, without even a hello, was that Connor had told her about my refusal to help with the baby's last name. I told her it wasn't a refusal to help, it was simply my decision about my child. She started with a speech about family and loyalty and tradition, and I just let her talk until she finished. When she went quiet, I asked her why she thought I owed her or Dad or Connor anything. She didn't respond, just stayed silent. So I kept talking. I told her that she had wanted to abort me, that she had never treated me like a daughter, that she went to Connor's wedding but not mine, that she was never there for any important moment in my life. I asked her why now suddenly my existence mattered just when she needed something from me. My mom started crying and told me I didn't understand the pressure she felt, that she had always wanted male grandchildren to continue the last name, that I was being cruel by denying them that. I told her the only cruel person in that conversation was her, and that if she wanted grandchildren who carried the last name, she should have thought about that before treating Connor like an untouchable god who never had to work for anything or face any consequences. I hung up and blocked her number. My dad called 2 days later. James answered because I was at work and told him I wasn't available. My dad apparently told James that it was his responsibility as a husband to convince me to do the right thing for my family. James, who is incredibly patient normally, told my dad that his only responsibility was to me and to our child, and that my biological family hadn't earned the right to have an opinion on our decisions. My dad insulted him, and James hung up. Lily told me, things at the house are super tense. Connor is still living there because he has nowhere to go, but my parents basically don't talk to him. Victoria left 2 weeks ago. They're officially separated. My parents keep blaming Connor for not being able to give them grandchildren, and Connor blames them for having spoiled him so much that now he can't function as an independent adult. It's a mess. And me. Well, I'm in California, living my life. I'm 7 months pregnant, and James and I are excited. We're going to give the baby James's last name, obviously, because that's his dad and that's our family. James's mom has already made us like 3 hand-knitted blankets. His sister is planning the baby shower. His dad is building a crib in his workshop. That's a real family. Do I feel anything for Connor? Losing everything? Honestly, not much. I feel sorry for Victoria because she got trapped in the middle of all this family drama without asking for it, but Connor is basically reaping what he sowed. He spent 30 years being the favorite, never had to work for anything, never had to earn our parents' love because he had it guaranteed just for existing. Now that he can't give them the only thing that really matters to them, a biological heir, he's finally experiencing what it's like to be the disappointment. I'm not happy about his suffering, but I'm also not going to pretend I feel more than I feel. As for my parents, I blocked their numbers after those calls. I don't want anything from them, and I definitely don't want them near my child. They're not going to have the chance to treat him the way they treated me, or to compare him to Connor's future grandchildren if Connor eventually resolves his situation. My son is going to grow up knowing he's loved unconditionally, not for his gender or for what he can do for others, but simply for being who he is. Lily is coming to visit us next month. She's going to stay with us for a few weeks to get away from the drama at my parents' house. She says she can't stand being there anymore with all the tension, and she's looking for another place to stay. I'm going to help her look because she was always the only one who treated me decently, and now I can return that. Do I feel guilty for not helping Connor? No. Should I feel bad for not giving in to my parents' demands? Not at all. I spent 28 years of my life trying to earn their love and approval, doing everything right, getting good grades, working hard, being independent, and it was never enough because the problem was never me. The problem was always that they didn't want a daughter. They wanted another son, and when they couldn't change my gender, they decided to simply ignore my existence as much as possible. Now that they have what they always wanted, a male child they can pamper and spoil, turns out that child can't fulfill their expectations of biological heir. And instead of rethinking their priorities or recognizing that their obsession with gender and last name is ridiculous, they decided the solution was to manipulate me into giving them what they wanted. As if I owed them something after everything. Last week, James and I went to the doctor for the 7-month ultrasound. Everything is perfect. The baby is healthy. He's growing well. The doctor asked us if we had decided on the name, and we told her yes, that he's going to be called Thomas James, with James's last name, of course. The doctor congratulated us and said it was a beautiful name. And it is. My son is going to have the last name of a man who loves me, respects me, chose me as his life partner, and who is already super excited to be a dad. He's going to have the last name of a family that took me in when mine rejected me, that celebrated my achievements when mine couldn't bother to show up, that treated me like a daughter when my own parents didn't know how to. He's not going to have the last name of people who only remembered I existed when they needed something from me. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right decision. Not about the baby's last name, I'm super clear on that, but about cutting off contact with my biological family. Then I remember it's not that I cut off contact. They never had contact with me to begin with. I simply stopped chasing something I was never going to get and started building my own family, one that chose me back. And that's enough. It's more than enough.